This is Queasy Crayfish, and after completing my Let's Play of Burning Rangers, I kind of hesitated to do this video because I hadn't played the game through all the way in probably close to 20 years, and I feel like going along with this Return to Saturn thing, I'm going to end up having the same reaction over and over and over again, especially where first-party games are concerned, because the problem with a lot of Sega Saturn games is not so much having to do with the games themselves or anything that's contained within them. When you look at a game like Knights, when you look at a game like Burning Rangers, when you look at Panzer Dragoon, these are all good games, and I definitely recommend them to anyone that hasn't played them, any Saturn owner who's curious. If you see Burning Rangers at a classic game store, definitely pick it up. You're going to end up paying a lot of money for it, but still, I think the experience is worth it. That being said, the problem with all of these games is that there's nothing more really after it, and they introduce all of these interesting concepts, these interesting worlds, and they don't do anything with them. They're these empty shells. And that's really the problem with, a lot of Sega's intellectual properties, and that goes all the way back to the Genesis, where you had, Streets of Rage and Golden Axe and all these games that just ended up basically disappearing as time went on. And Burning Rangers is a perfect example of that. You have this great intellectual property with all these interesting ideas, original ideas that you haven't really seen in many other games. I mean, the idea of fire as being your main enemy, and all of the environmental hazards that can go along with that. And you could easily see it's so much room for growth, and you can imagine in today's day and age, if there were new Burning Rangers coming out, all the amazing lighting effects they could do with the fire, and all these neat concepts of flammable environments with oil spills and gas leaks and pressurized space stations and stuff like that, and all these interesting things that they could do with fire. And unfortunately, that's never going to happen because Burning Rangers is dead. And, Panzer Dragoon is dead. All of these franchises are dead. Looking back on Burning Rangers, you can easily see where, given the fact that there's virtually no limitations set for this universe that these characters exist in. I mean, it goes from Earth to space, and it's in future, and there's even weird abstract stuff at the end of the game, almost supernatural. You could see where they could explore so many different stories and so many different ideas in this world, and this series could have been, with the right creative direction, I think, Sega's answer to something like Metal Gear Solid, because they have a lot of similarities when you think about it. When you think about the extensive use of voice acting, characterization, this idea of having your team behind you and constantly in contact with you. When you look at Metal Gear Solid and infiltrating these facilities and rescuing hostages and stuff like that, and Burning Rangers, the same idea, infiltrating these fire-compromised stations and rescuing survivors. When you look at the anime influence that both games have, when you look at these big set-piece boss battles, easily with if you had stripped away all of the arcade elements that needlessly hold back a game like Burning Rangers, the game over timer and continues extra lives, stuff like that, and these discrete separations between the levels where they're separated by menus instead of by story elements. Easily, this game could have been something to rival a release like Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid was a huge release for the PlayStation. There's no reason that Sega shouldn't have sought to compete with that, especially when you look at Sega's history of creating franchises which were basically just reactions to other franchises. And this was an idea that Mars Vindicator brought up in our discussions about Sega years ago. The idea of Streets of Rage as this competitor to Final Fight, and when you look at Virtua Fighter as this kind of born out of a need to compete in the fighting game market when there's already an oversaturation of 2D fighters, you go into 3D. You introduce this new competitive area of 3D fighting games, and of course Sonic and Mario and so on and so forth. There's no reason that Burning Rangers shouldn't have been Sega's competitor to a big heavy hitter like Metal Gear Solid, which at the time was exclusive to PlayStation. And there was a PC release, but as far as consoles go, PlayStation exclusive. No reason the Sega shouldn't have developed their first party portfolio. And that's really all I have to say about Burning Rangers from a philosophical standpoint. I think this game has a lot going for it. Definitely check it out. A lot of people like to complain about the graphics. The graphics are a little ugly in places, but given the fact that they were working so extensively with this fire effect that was really hard for the Saturn to do in the first place, and given all of the visual variety and the interesting colors and stuff that you see on screen, I think that that overcomes a lot of the shortcomings of the graphics. And camera and other problems and stuff like that are really just products of the time, and limitations of the controller and so on and so forth, because there was no second stick precedent until the DualShock came out anyway. So the idea that you're going to complain about L and R being the way you control the camera is just kind of silly to me. So definitely check out Burning Rangers, and definitely check out the rest of the Let's Play. And I will see you next time on Return to Saturn. Thanks for watching.